All right, so Camille typed a very long response. I have not read any of it. I looked at how massive and how long she spent typing, and I feel that I should give it the attention that it deserves. She obviously spent all of that time writing it. It's something that is important to her and very heartfelt. So I am going to break it down. Um, before reading it now, because I have it up in a different window, um, I started off with this right here. I'm going to post it over on the side here. I'm also going to play a couple of seconds of it. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. Um, Sometimes it won't. So, why is America the greatest country in the world? It's a great speech. It's from a movie. Um, we'll skip that part. We'll go to Camille. She typed, I agree about dangers of polarization, false patriotism, but I disagree with democracy as mob rule. Well, I didn't say that democracy is mob rule. See, we're talking about the difference between on paper and in reality. In reality, well, yeah, in reality, democracy is not democracy. In reality, democracy on paper is not what we have. In reality, communism on paper is not what we have. In reality, a Democrat on paper is completely different from a human being who identifies as a Democrat. Um, and if the public is not educated, then it absolutely is mob rule. It's whoever you believe the most. You want to believe this guy because he's got all the money, he must be right. Or you're going to take her opinion because you didn't actually look anything up, but she's pretty and you like her and you want her to like you. So you take her opinion. That is very much mob rule. It's about your motivations. Who is it that is promising you what you want? It does not actually matter if they intend on delivering or not. It matters on whether or not they can convince you. And nothing passes a convincing lie more than a beautiful smile. By the way, there have been college studies done in communist nations about this, and democratic nations about this, and socialist nations about this, and yes, all of those nations, their studies all agree on the fact that a clean, pretty, straight teeth, beautiful smile will pass a lie. Far more than if you got a mouth like mine. I got no teeth. If I had crooked teeth that were all gangly and nasty, yeah, I wouldn't be able to pass a lie nearly as well either. Pretty smile. That's what does it. And a pretty face to go with that smile. That is worth so much more. She typed, its concept says three morons who think subjectively that the sky is red can subjugate two who are objectively correct that it isn't. Well, I can break that down two different ways. First of all, if I incorrectly teach my children that that is red, and they think that the fundamentals of the sky are red, well, I can say that communism is red. I can say that democracy is red. If I live in Russia, I can say that democracy is the red. The sky is blue. The sky is the sky no matter what color you call it. We need to establish that first of all. The sky is the sky no matter what you call it. If you call it red, if you call it blue, if you call it purple, it doesn't matter. If I have a cloud, clouds are white, are they not? Oh, well, we have to argue. Some clouds are green, but if we have a thunderstorm coming, then the clouds are dark, the clouds are black. Well, let's say we have two different people who speak different languages, right? I could point to somebody of Hispanic origin and with a Hispanic language, and I can point to the sky and say it's white. See, it's white. And one of them points and says, Blanco, Blanco. Well, Blanco sounds closer to black than white, doesn't it? Are they wrong? No, they're not. It's just a different word. It's the same fundamentals. Human nature is the same, no matter what. No matter what we write on paper, human nature is the same. Whether we call the bad parts of human nature that we don't like communism or democracy or capitalism, the fact is that no matter what we call it, it's human nature. If I teach my children that the sky is red, and you teach your children, and we teach 90% of the children in this town of Chapel, Nebraska, that the sky is red, does the sky become red? Actually, yes. Yes, it does. Because we have now changed the colors, because we have changed the names. Because now, if we're calling the blue sky red, then that very same explanation is here beer can. It's also red. And of course, we have to replace that with something else. So this red pen we have to call blue. We're exchanging words. That's all we're doing is exchanging words. Changing the word of something does not change its properties. If I teach my children that communism is evil and to hate communism and to shame people who like communism, that's what I've taught my children, and that's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to believe. Unless you're someone like me who believes that your parents are idiots. Now, if we teach everyone that the sky is red, if we all decided that we were going to teach our children today that the sky is red, then we would also be teaching them that, well, anything that is blue is red. And over time, yes, the sky is red. We have changed the word to mean something else. And that's what we've done. Now, this is just the first part of this big long thing. She typed, secondly, this country was not founded on socialism. It absolutely was. We, the people, that itself is a social contract. Now, we want to redefine what socialism means, but the key word there is social. Basic idea of communism, that's the reason we call it communism. It's because the basic idea is that we are working towards the betterment of our community. And that's what we try to say about democracy, too. Democracy is to try to better the community, to make things better. Although capitalism is very specific about greed is what's important. Socialism, the key word there is social. That right there denotes that we are not alone. It's not just me on this planet. It's not just my neighbor on this planet. It's a social contract. If we work together, then we get something. Now, if we are all working together for one person to get something, then we're all screwing ourselves. And that's where the segregation and separation, by calling red blue or blue red, or calling that cloud blanco instead of white, That's where all that comes into play. Now we're playing on words, just like I've been doing by speaking this entire time. Just playing on words. Well, the definition that I heard about democracy, the definition that I heard about communism, the definition that I heard about socialism. Now, you guys are going out, and as a supposedly democratic nation, we look at communist Russia, which is not communist. It's not. It's also not socialist, just the same as America is not socialist. It's socialist in ideology and communist in ideology and also democratic in ideology, only on paper. All of the fundamentals that these people try to play on, the human nature that they try to play on, is all the same. The communists, with all of the stuff that they're doing that doesn't work on paper, they're making the same promises as a democratic nation or a socialist nation. They are all making the same promises of what the people will get from it. But the fact is, none of these actually deliver on those same promises. And it doesn't matter what nation you're in, they're making the same promises. Russia is pointing at America and saying, see all of the terrible things that are happening in America. Terrible things that are happening here in America are the same things that are happening in Russia. It's the same propaganda. It's exactly the same sky. It was founded on the principles of the common law of England, but the framing was based on individualism and liberty, which is a concept opposing both socialism and monarchical rule or monarchical rule. All right. You know what Queen Anne's War was, right? Let me explain to you that there was a war between the French, the British, the Spanish, and the Dutch. And a lot of were hired. It's basically a pirate for hire. So, at the end of the war, all of these privateers, or many of these privateers, went, you know what? All of these people just signed an end to the war. We just lost a bunch of our brothers and sisters, people who we've been on these boats with for years, people that we know and love, our fellow soldiers, and they just threw us all away. All of these nations threw us all away. And they banded together to form the Brotherhood of the Coast. True democracy, it's also true communism. The community is what's important. What is best for all of us? That is what democracy plays on. What is best for all of us? That is what communism plays on and socialism plays on. What's best for us? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Now, in democracy, that's actually what she tears apart in this first sentence or this first paragraph, where she says its concept says three morons who think subjectively that the sky is red can subjugate two who are obviously objectively correct that it isn't. That's very important to actually point out, is that that really tears down the idea of democracy, the idea of an uneducated vote. But the fundamentals of democracy are, if the public is educated, then they can make an educated decision. And that's where propaganda is so important. Propaganda, shaming people for trying to teach something that you don't agree with. Now, there was a famous man who you guys can look up saying and find out who it is that said it. But I'm going to take a hit off of this. It's tobacco, by the way, not marijuana. And it was that simple for me to forget literally what it was that I was about to say. So I guess that part doesn't matter, and it was a waste of oxygen. Um, the opposing of monarchical rule. Um, whether it's 4 years or 40 years, we're still electing a figurehead. That figurehead's going to be gone in 4 years. Does that make it greater? Actually, it makes it more complicated because every 4 years we got to fucking start over. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Meanwhile, we don't really make much progress. We like to believe we do, but here we are amid this coronavirus, and we're living what people want to call socialism. They want to call socialism a terrible thing, a terrible thing. But then here we are, we're locked down in our houses, and people don't like that aspect of it, but people are loving the idea of getting free money, aren't they? Well, it's not free money. We pay taxes. Hey, lots of homeless people pay taxes. Lots of homeless people have jobs, pay taxes, are still homeless, and no stimulus package, by the way. There are lots of them who can no longer work. When they hurt themselves, they didn't get what you guys got with the workman's comp or the whatever it is that they pay you when you're out of work. They didn't get any of that stuff. Maybe they hurt themselves at home and weren't entitled to that. Maybe they didn't have that good insurance. It doesn't mean they didn't work as hard. That's a lot of socioeconomic issues that are very important to note. Where is your starting line? And what is your measure of success? The idea of a president is exactly the same as the idea of a monarch. The only difference is how long. How long was that person in power? How long? How long was the captain of a ship in power? Was it 4 years? No. It was until the people decided to vote him off. They could vote him off at any point in time. At any point in time, at sea, people on board the ship, which under a monarchy would have been considered a mutiny, on a pirate ship, it's majority rules. But also, everybody got to show their point. You would have a vote on board the ship with everyone present, and you would present your points. And also, if you made false promises, there were consequences. You said, hey, we're going to go to Port Royal and we're going to raid the place for all of its riches. I promise you that those riches are there. I promise you. And then you get to Port Royal and there's no riches. Well, you're in deep shit. You made some promises you probably shouldn't have made. Just like a president making promises he shouldn't have made. But then again, what are the consequences? Donald Trump made lots of promises that he wasn't able to keep. That didn't stop him from making those promises, but in a true democracy, he'd be gone already. In a true democracy, you have to keep your word. And that's where educating the public comes in. If you lie to your shipmates in order to get what you want, like, oh, my girl is in the port of Spain. So if I can convince the whole crew with a lie to take me to the port of Spain, oh, then you get to the port of Spain, they realize that you've lied. You're not a part of the crew anymore. You might not still be alive anymore. The president, just like a monarch, gets special rights. And that there is against the fundamentals of the Constitution. We the people, equality. That's what I'm after. That's why I have such an issue with Donald Trump or any president for that matter. They get special rights. They are more entitled to those rights than we are. And those rights are supposed to be our rights. You want all of us to contribute to it, but not all of us get something out of it. Just like in a monarchy. Not all of us who go to work every day and bust our asses are going to get paid $120,000 a year. And not everybody who gets paid $120,000 a year is busting their ass for it. Now, ideally, in a perfect world, the lumpers would get paid the most. These are our low dollar jobs here in the United States. The guy who spends his days for 60 years loading and unloading cement pallets. Same job his entire life. Loading and unloading cement pallets. And he don't get paid shit, but he is working harder than the guy who was lucky enough to be able to go to Cambridge, and he gets to be a law professor, and he gets to talk for a living. That's what he gets paid to do, and he gets paid far more in a single day than that guy who's moving cement is going to earn in an entire month. Now, a movie star going to get paid even more than that because they're good looking. Oh my God, Pamela Anderson is so hot. Okay, so she deserves more money than that guy who's busting his ass at the cement pallets. All right, all right. That's the thing, is that whether it's the president or a monarchy, it's the same difference. And you want to pretend like monarchs have absolute rule. No, the people always have the ability to overthrow their monarch. Always. The monarch may have special rights on paper, and they may be above the law on paper, but they're not above the people. You piss the people off enough, yeah, they can do something about it. They can say, we're tired of your empty promises. We are tired of working and getting nothing out of it. And the same thing in this society. There are so many people who are not attractive in the United States who aren't making a whole bunch of money because they're not attractive. And that is what it comes down to in most cases. If you have two people, one of them who is not physically attractive and the other one who is physically attractive, and they have the same abilities, you're going to hire the one who is physically attractive. And in most cases, if the person who is unattractive is slightly more qualified than the person who is not attractive, or slightly more qualified than the person who is attractive, they're still going to choose the one who's attractive. And that has been proven time and again. Not all forms of democracy, in fact, few equate with liberty at all. And that is very true. What is liberty? What is your definition of liberty? Is your definition of liberty red or is it blue? Is it white or is it blanco? Do you understand what liberty is? Calling it liberty doesn't make it liberty. Calling someone free doesn't make them free. Saying that we freed the slaves, when really what we did is at the end of the Civil War, all of these slaves were made homeless and we rounded them up and we put them in chain gangs because they're now criminals because they're transients, and we made anti-homeless laws. And we also made chain gangs. And we made the 13th Amendment, which makes anyone who is convicted of a crime, we can make them a slave. If you can convince someone to plead guilty to a crime that they didn't commit through torture, which we do here in the United States, physical, mental, it don't matter. We take people away from their families and we lock them up, and if they are too poor to buy themselves out, then they can't see their loved ones, and it hurts them. It hurts them greatly. And they are willing to succumb to your wants in order to see their loved ones. That's happening right now with Mariah Johnson. She's willing to admit guilt of something that she's not guilty of so that she can see her family, so that she's not locked up. Now let's see. The Anti-Federalist Papers reveal many founders did not agree with majority rule at all, and the entire framework, with checks and balances, indicates that rather than favoring the more socialist crown rules, it actually favors a heavily restrained government where the minority, not the majority, are able to prosper and flourish. And that is true. That's one of the great things about it. However, what you've got to do in that particular situation is have a society that is not manipulated by, well, human nature. Lazy people will love to use those words to manipulate people who are not lazy into working their whole lives for absolutely nothing because of the fundamental ideas of is the sky red or is it blue? Convincing people to work against their nature and against their best interests through propaganda, claiming that communism is this way or claiming that democracy is that way. It's all just division, divide and conquer, manipulation. The Communist Manifesto do not contain wonderful ideology, instead mischaracterize government as anything more than force, which is all it is. Government is not now, nor has it ever been, from the beginning of civilization, reason, logic, common sense, or even eloquence. It is force, nothing more. 100% you are correct. Absolutely. Did we earn the United States from the Native Americans? No, we absolutely didn't. Our ancestors killed people for it. And then we inherit the land. Well, it was my father's. I earned it for being his son. Well, did he earn it? How did he earn it? He earned it by fucking killing people, didn't he? Or some rich asshole was paying a bunch of soldiers who he lied to go kill a bunch of natives and take what's theirs. And then you want these soldiers and their families to stay on your side, so you allow them to work the land. And you tell them that it's theirs, but they got to pay you taxes or tribute. But in reality, she's absolutely right. It is force, nothing more. Did you take it by title or did you take it at the tip of a sword? Marxism even fails in paper because it says that government should decide what wealth is. Ah, well, see, that's the thing about Marxism. She's very much leaning heavy on Marxism. The things that she doesn't like about Marxism, the very same things in the former one as well, about the Communist Manifesto, apply equally to democracy in the United States. Democracy on paper is a wonderful idea. Marxism on paper is actually a pretty good idea. I mean, you look at all of the issues that we have as a society and why we have those issues. Karl Marx was a fucking smart dude. And as much as I don't want to admit this, especially being as I'm of Hebrew ancestry, Adolf Hitler was pretty smart too. He was still a fucking idiot. He still did wrong shit. He did a lot of things that he spoke out about, saying that these things are wrong, and then he did them himself. Lovely, isn't it? At the same time, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., many of the things that Adolf Hitler talked about in Mein Kampf Yes, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said those very same things or very similar. It's speaking to what people want. Really, people want what's best for them. And if you promise them what they want, yeah, they're going to fucking follow you until they realize that you're completely full of shit. With Adolf Hitler, he was able to manipulate people until he shot himself in the head. And anybody he wasn't able to manipulate, the people who he had manipulated, will shoot you in the head for him. America's no different. It's really not. Um, who has too much and that it should use physical force to take it away at all costs. That happens in America every single day. Marxism fails on paper because of that reason. America does that. America does that every day. But the difference is, according to Marxism, it's equality. His idea was for equality. It was to prevent hoarding, hoarding of money, hoarding of resources. Like that video that I made about the difference between a tomato and money. You use the idea of money as the replacement for the tomato so that you can hoard that tomato and get people to work against their best interest. And all governments work that way, every one of them. Labor is a sacred right of human existence as our assets. No one has a right to say another has too much, nor that they have the right to take it away. Really? I was born into a country where I have no land, none. But there are lots of people who have land. I was born into a country where there is no place for me because it is all already owned. Those resources aren't mine, they're somebody else's. They're Donald Trump's, he owns it. They're Brian Bruce's, he owns it. Well, Brian Bruce is dead, but or it belongs to Angela Wade, she owns it. Or it belongs to whoever else. But the fact is, these are our resources. It's our planet. We live on it together. A squirrel isn't going to pay me fucking rent for staying in the tree outside, is it? Yet it still is able to exist without money. It's able to pee outside without having to register as a sex offender. It can have sex with another squirrel in public, in sight of me and children and adults and old people who are going to get offended by the word fuck. Do those squirrels get in trouble for fucking in front of the whole lot of us? It don't matter. They don't care. But we say that it's lewd and it's nasty. Well, they're still going to do it now, aren't they? They don't pay taxes, yet they are still alive. And of course, they do the labor, but they get to keep the products of their labor. If a squirrel gathers 200 nuts to share with its lady squirrel, and she gathers 200 nuts to share with her gentleman squirrel, they have 400 nuts together. 400 nuts for mutual benefit. They're not working for 400 nuts and then arguing over who gets to keep the 20 nuts that they're allowed to keep between themselves in 2 months and having to give the rest of those nuts to somebody else because it's their fucking tree. It's the fat squirrel's tree, isn't it? The thing about that is that that's naturally the way that it is for people. Those squirrels can have those nuts taken away, same as we can have our stuff taken away. A bigger squirrel could come and kick that squirrel out by force. Yeah, the fact that there's two squirrels there is safety in numbers. Says liberty is about principle. Now we need to establish, first of all, what liberty is. All right, what is liberty really? If government has the power to take even a single penny from people, and therefore the sacred right to survive by one's own labor, it is immoral and unprincipled. I agree. Yet we live in this society that you want to support, despite the fact that it does the exact same thing. It's not just communism and not just Marxism. We don't have liberty. According to that definition, we do not have liberty anywhere in the world unless you're a squirrel. Giving must be voluntary and come from the heart and conscience of free people who are also free to do the contrary. Well, the thing is that we're not free people. There are people who have and people that don't. There are people who have $1 million loan from their daddy and lots of property. And there are people who are born with nothing, who, if they go onto that property, they're trespassing now. If they're in Boulder, Colorado, and they're on public property, and they still have to sleep no matter what, that is going to happen. You are going to go to sleep. But if you're in Boulder, Colorado, on public property, when you go to sleep, you're breaking the law and you are trespassing. You didn't ask to be born in a land where everything is already owned, did you? That's some other squirrel's tree. But you're not allowed to beat up that squirrel and take away his tree. However, if you're in his tree and you collected nuts, that squirrel can beat you up and kick you out and take your nuts. And you have nowhere to go. If you don't give that squirrel its nuts, he's going to call to the squirrels from the next tree. And if you end up there, they're going to take your nuts too. They're going to lock you up in a little hole in that tree. You're not going to have any nuts. And they're going to tell you that you owe them nuts. And if you want to get out, you have to give them more nuts. You better go to where you have nuts stashed so that you can give them nuts. But you have to have somebody else go get those nuts to bring it to your jail. Are you not getting this? Are you not getting the analogy? You got to have another squirrel or another person go to the bank and get some money to bail you out. You're not even in the same tree where you were trespassing. You're in a different tree altogether. But these are brown squirrels and you're a red squirrel. You're a poor person. So there's nobody to pay that. The brown squirrels are the cops. You can't give them any nuts. These are not just the cops, these are the property owners. These are the rich, the elite. And you owe them because you exist. And they want more and more every year because you exist. Every year, you owe them more than you did the year before. And you're a bad squirrel if you don't give them what they want. And if you can't pay them for existing, they're going to punish you for existing. It doesn't matter if you want to call it constitutional, unconstitutional, communist, socialist, Nazi. It doesn't matter if you want to call it Christian or Muslim. The fact is, it's still human nature. I favor anarchism over Marxism. I agree with you 100% on this, Camille. 100%. But we're talking about true anarchism, not the idea of anarchism that they play on Hollywood, where everybody is grabbing Molotov cocktails and throwing it through people's buildings and stuff. True anarchism is the way that animals live. Animals are anarchists. They are. Some of them are socialist anarchists. I mean, if you look at the family dynamics of a dog versus the family dynamics of a wolf, I mean, these are social creatures. And then you've got the family dynamics of the cat. These are not social creatures, but both of them are anarchists. Anarchy doesn't mean that you're out to harm everyone. That's Hollywood anarchy. In reality, if I see somebody who's hungry, I want to help them naturally. But everything is owned, and I'll be punished for utilizing what's on there, even though it's hoarding and these people have much more than they will ever need. They're greedy. They don't want to share, and they own it by paper. That's the thing with paper, is that paper is always wrong. In my personal opinion, paper is always wrong. It may be a good concept, but it's just paper. We don't live on paper, we live in reality. It says, I favor anarchism over Marxism. People voting with their feet all over the world prove Marxism doesn't work. It proves that American democracy doesn't work. It proves that capitalism doesn't work. It proves that everything that we try to force people into doesn't work. Everything that is not based on how it is in real life, everything that is not based on human nature, on our animalistic nature, because we are exactly like animals. We just want to pretend that we're not, and that's the problem with humans. We are unrealistic. We live by abstract thought. Animals don't. Um, they are not fleeing the U.S. in shark infested waters on life rafts to get away from capitalism. They are fleeing Cuba. Well, take a look at Cuba. Really, take a look at Cuba. There are lots of countries in the world that people are not trying to flee from. Lots of them. And there are lots of people in the United States who are trying to flee. But that depends on the regime. Human nature is still the same. I mean, me, I'd love to leave the United States. I really would. But where am I going to go? All of the land in Europe is owned. All of the land in Asia is owned. All of the land in Africa is owned. It was already divvied up before I got here. And I got to shove some people to the side in order to make a little hole in the center and hope that people will leave me alone. So now I'm scrunched up like this, going, oh my God, I got a crack to live in. Why are we doing that? Meanwhile, there's the squirrel next door is a good looking squirrel. So that rich squirrel who owns the whole goddamn tree and probably half of the forest, well, this squirrel gets to inherit all of that just for being a good looking squirrel. Yeah. God bless America. Chinese are shouting on balconies, help us. Freedom of speech is what we want. We want it here in the United States too. The things that I have been speaking out about, if I go to Colorado, they're going to arrest me for all this shit that I've been saying. You do realize that, right? I mean, first of all, we got gag orders. That's obviously an obstruction of freedom of speech. Now, freedom of speech, are you allowed to say anything you want? Well, yes and no. If you say something that is incorrect and you get people hurt, it's against the law. But then again, it depends on if people care. Are you good looking? What Natalie Bollinger said was a lie. Things that her family was playing, they were lies. But then again, they're good looking. So they got away with it. It doesn't matter that I was in the right in any of it because I'm not allowed to show anything in court. That's an obstruction of my freedom of speech as well as my freedom of speech. They can say whatever they want about me and incite people to violence against me, but I'm not allowed to say anything. I have to just take it because we live in such a free country. We live in such a wonderful democracy, such a great liberty. Freedom of speech is what I want. What I'm doing now, yes, they will lock me up for it if I go to Colorado. There's a possibility that I'll get locked up for it anyway. Now, that saying that I was talking about earlier, that I forgot what it was, um, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. I have the right to limit people's freedom of speech here on my Facebook. And at first, I didn't do that. But then my freedom of speech was limited in these Natalie Bollinger groups. My freedom of speech was limited in the courts. My freedom of speech was limited by the police. My freedom of speech was very limited. I'm free to speak, but people are free to speak over me. I'm free to speak, but people are free to scream over me. I'm free to speak, and it's illegal for somebody to punch me in the face for speaking, but that's not going to stop them from doing it. Are you going to stop them from doing it? Are you going to stop them from violating my rights as a human being? Of course you're not. It's not happening to you, so it must be fine. It's not happening to you, so I must deserve it. Freedom of speech don't exist in the United States, not unless people care. If 100,000 people took a look at what I had to say and said, hey man, that is fucked up, somebody needs to do something about that, and they stood up in public, then those in power would go, hey, we better appease these people, otherwise they might do something crazy, and everything that I have taken from them might be at risk. I can't spend any of the stuff that I've taken from them if they kill me over this. And that's why propaganda comes in so important. The propaganda from the Bollinger family, the propaganda from the police, the propaganda from the news. Propaganda is mob rule. That's why the entire world is mob rule. Whoever controls the propaganda controls who gets to speak and who doesn't, controls who is heard and who isn't. Let's see. People want to come here, not leave it. No, I absolutely do. There are lots of people who want to leave the United States and go to Canada. There are lots of people who flee the United States every year to go to Canada and Mexico. A lot of them. And with the way that the law doesn't work here and the injustice system screws lives over for being poor, I don't blame them. I don't. I want to leave the United States. But at the same time, it's not going to be better anywhere else. The only way that it's going to get better here is if I stand up and do something about it. Not just say it, but actually do it. When you cut through the cuckism, the truth is that while America is not perfect, it is better than any Marxist regime, and we will continue to fight if we have to die to keep Marxism. Well, that's just a bunch of ignorance right there. I'm not interested in having Marxism in the United States. I'm not interested. I'm not. I'm interested in humanity. Believe it or not, what I believe is the best way to live all comes from the New Testament. It all comes from Jesus H. fucking Christ. My entire belief system, every bit of it, is based off of Jesus. It is all based off of the New Testament of the Bible. Jesus lived by love. He lived for humanity. He didn't say to go hurting people. He said a lot of shoulds. But the thing is, if you read the Bible and you break it all down into what it really is, Jesus served humanity, not God. Jesus broke the Old Testament, shattered it completely. That's what Jesus did. He took that ideology and he smashed it into a million pieces and said, you know, I got a better idea. How about we treat humans like humans? He made a speech about how we're all going to die. And people use that speech as an excuse to go harming others. I'm not interested in your fucking excuses as a Christian. I like what the Jesus had to say. I like the way that Jesus treated people. I do. He treated people well. He also got scared. He did. He didn't want to die, but he was willing to do so in the hopes that, well, for starters, he didn't have much of a choice by that time. But also, he believed that it would do good for humanity. Meanwhile, people want to twist what Jesus had to say into something that he didn't. They want to twist what he lived for into something that it wasn't. They want to focus on parts that are so trivial. Oh, we have to argue over whether or not he's the Son of God. I don't care if he's the Son of God. I care how he treated other human beings. I can forgive you, but if you keep doing it, I'm going to stop forgiving you. I'm just going to ignore you. I'm going to go away from you. If you're not going to let me leave, that's when we have an issue. I absolutely love the Jesus. I like the fundamentals of Christianity. I like the Ten Commandments. They're good rules because they're rules that are based on human nature. But they also, well, they basically tell you not to be human, not to covet your neighbor's wife. All right. She's hot though, dude. She is so fine. She is so fine. And then as far as stealing, you claim that this all belongs to other people. The paper says that this all belongs to other people. Well, you know what? If you have 1,000 fields of wheat and you're going to harm a man and lock him up and take away days of his lives or of his life because he wants to use some of that to feed himself, who's the real criminal there? Is he less of a human being, less deserving of being able to eat because he doesn't have 10,000 fields or 100,000 fields or whatever you happen to have? Is he any less of a human being? Does he deserve that food less? Does he owe you for that food? You didn't grow that. You can't possibly eat all of that grain. There is no need for you to have that much except for greed. It also says here at the very bottom, Sanders and Biden will not win this election, regardless of this mass biowarfare strategy. Oh, so Sanders and Biden did the biowarfare thing? I'm going to tell you straight up, I don't care about Sanders and Biden. I don't care about Trump. I don't like the guy, but I don't really like Sanders or Biden either. I don't like any politician. Anybody who seeks power doesn't deserve it. I don't think that I'm fine with elections, but I don't think that we should have these people choosing whether or not they run. In my personal opinion, here in Chapel, Nebraska, I would love to have a king for 4 years, somebody who has complete control over all of it. And I already know who I would vote for. But if he ran for office, I wouldn't. I wouldn't vote for somebody who runs for office. That's not what a true duly elected president or duly elected short term king or monarchy or queen for that matter, because there are actually two women in this town that I think would be great for the job. But if they ran for the position, it would show that they want power. And if they want power, they don't deserve it. I like a lot of the things that Sanders has to say. I don't know shit about Biden. I like the fact that Sanders fought for human rights. A lot of the stuff that I hear him talking about, a lot of the stuff that I've seen him do, people wouldn't say that he's a racist because he was against affirmative action. He's not a racist. That's the thing. Is he wants equal rights, not special rights for a particular group. You have no idea how many racists here in Nebraska who are in the KKK or the Aryan Brotherhood use affirmative action as their excuse to hate black people. Black people didn't do that. That was your lawmakers. But you're going to hate black people because of affirmative action? That is so fucked up. But then again, that's the division. They have special rights, and that's not fair. Fair and equal. Communism, they try to explain it that it would be fair and equal, but it's not. Socialism, fair and equal, but it's not. How about capitalism? Fair and equal. It's definitely not. We have as big of a difference between myself and Donald Trump as we have between a homeless Russian and Vladimir Putin. We have as much of a difference between the lowliest people in North Korea and the head of that country, whose name I can't pronounce. And I mean that, I don't have any teeth. But that's the point. When I see somebody who's hungry, it hurts me to be told I can't feed them. They have to do it themselves. Meanwhile, there's a dude right next to him. He's got 30 different sandwiches. He's making $80 an hour. He didn't work any harder than that motherfucker who ain't got nothing. What gives him the right to hoard it like that? Hoard our resources, our planetary resources, cannot belong to human beings. I like some of the things that Sanders has to say. I like some of the things that Trump has to say. That doesn't mean I like Trump. That doesn't mean that I like Sanders. I can love them because they're humans. But I can also be angry at them because, well, they're not into equality. They, well, depending on which part of their political aspects you're staring at, each one of them has bad things to say too, things that I don't agree with. There is a point where we do need to limit wealth. Donald Trump doesn't deserve everything that he's got. No, he shouldn't be allowed to hoard resources the way that he does. The people at the bottom shouldn't be left with absolutely nothing and treated like they're doing nothing for it when they're doing more than Donald Trump ever will or ever has. I want to see Donald Trump get out there with Gary Jepsen and split logs for a weekend. I do. And then I want to see him on Monday go out there and cut trees with them boys. And Tuesday as well. I want him to sharpen the chainsaws and gas and oil them motherfuckers. I want him to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to a phone call saying, hey, we need to go clean out a sewer. It's an emergency. They had a funeral. People died. They need to have the sewer cleaned out because there's going to be a bunch of guests there starting at 9 o'clock in the morning. Is Donald Trump going to do that? Is Donald Trump going to be out there with a shovel for years and years and years? I was at Gary Jepsen's beck and call for 6 years. Same thing with Janet Roberts. I'd go from one job to the other. For the first 3 years of that, I was going to work, getting my money, and making sure that my little brother and sister had food. My mom was putting it all up her nose.